Okay. Hello, everybody. We know you all. So it will be kind of relaxed conversation, and you can jump in whenever you want. And with us tonight is Kasia Molga, UK-based artist, originally from Poland. And Kasia was our residence in framework of the Starts for Water framework. And she was exploring the kind of the bay of Rijeka, and the kind of she did the work that you will have a chance to see immediately after our talk. And maybe just for the beginning, I would like, Kasia, if you can tell us just briefly about your career path, how you come to explore sea and connecting and to connect the science and technology and arts in your work.
How long do we have?
You have 5 minutes max.
No, I kind of feel that this question is for us sitting around the table with a good bottle of good wine and just, talking. But anyway, so when I was a child, I grew up traveling with my dad, who was a sailor on the merchant navy vessels. And the reason for that was that I was very sick. I had extremely bad case of asthma. And even though I was born in the communist country and the authorities didn't really let other people out of the block, I had a very clever doctor who said that in order for me to survive, I need to be on the sea. So my dad decided that in this case, he will be looking after me on the board of this big merchant navy vessels. He was the first officer. He never was a captain because he didn't belong to the political party, which was really funny, even though he had all the qualifications. And since I remember till the end of my primary school, I was just in and out of the country. So I was mostly traveling with him, and I was actually everywhere. I visited each single ocean. And so that love towards sea. So basically sea, for me means home. When I was a child, I kind of have this weird sense of ownership. Like when you're a child and you remember your street when you grew up, and you have this kind of sense of belonging and ownership. That's how I felt about the sea. And, till this day, I feel that way. And so it kind of, and then of course, one went through various other adventures, but, I started to study art in Poland. Then I moved to England. I also studied computer science, and I also have a diploma from environmental conservation faculty. At some point, everything came together, and while I was exploring various subjects, it was natural that love towards sea and ways to convey that love, that passion to other people was the most kind of underlying motivation to what I do. So yes, that's about it, really.
Yeah, and here you were attracted with the topic that we kind of, we published the call, and the topic was kind of oil traces in the sea, which is, I would say, a very important topic for Rijeka, because has a long history of oil refinery in the center of the city. Now it's kind of a few kilometers away from the center, but still is something really present in the city. And in a way, you already had certain experience in working with oil leaks and petrol and so on. So how did you envision your work in Rijeka, and what really happened during your residency here? I mean, kind of did you meet kind of this your kind of initial idea, or did you change approach, or how it worked here?
Okay, so let's first, I kind of, there's a few questions in your question, so I'm going to try to answer one by one.
Great that you're structured.
I'm trying. So when I was growing up, I spent, first of all, an awful amount of time on the big boats, which are really dependent on, fossil fuel petrol industry. And it was during the, 70s and 80s where I think the general public didn't really know yet, or the news about the ecological implications of this industry weren't so known to general public. They weren't, broadcasted. And so there was that, I think, a lot of awe and hope, and it was kind of, I think, celebrated industry. And there was also a sort of, this carefree moment, I think, in our lives as well. So there is this kind of, there is this kind of petro nostalgia right now, which is happening, where people kind of look back at that times. And the same, I spent an enormous amount of time in harbors, and the harbor where I was, the city where I was born, which is called Szczecin in Poland, is very similar to Rijeka, and it's also a big harbor, and it was very important place in Poland. It was the biggest harbor after Second World War, and of course, it was kind of the center for all the trade and the intercontinental travels. So there was always that in a way, partially negotiations between, when this news, started appearing about, the pollutions and dangers and also the complexities of how entangled, hence Petroentanglement, entangled our lives are with petrol and fossil fuel in general. There was always these negotiations between, the fact that this industry can bring prosperity, but at the same time, it can bring so much destructions. And then in 2011, there was a BP oil spill in Gulf of Mexico, and I was part of the team who was looking at using open source technologies to create, to build the unmanned sailing vessels, which could help people clean the oil spills from the surface. We made it as an art project. However, it was a functional device which could, people could make it. And it was kind of affordable and published, and we had lots of negotiations as well with the oil companies because obviously they wanted to buy it because, the oil companies, they cause a lot of distractions, but also they have, this very expensive equipment which cleans the surface of the sea when the spill happens, and they are not really willing to give it to, like a regular fishermen for a small amount of money. It costs lots of money, and we wanted to kind of break it and do something else. And so that kind of negotiations between the fact that we are so immersed in oil and these pollutions and so dependent on it. And it can, bring lots of good things, but at the same time, it can cause so much bad things as well. It's something which constantly disturbs me, and I think, that's the subject which I usually want to explore. Something which cannot be, there is not like a right or wrong answer So that was one of the reasons. What was the question?
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
okay, that's the kind of, let's say, pretext
Yeah.
of your research in Rijeka, you know, kind of. So you were already familiar with the topic very much, and you worked. I mean, kind of recently. That is one of the major accidents that happened. This deep water horizon
Yeah.
that happened in Gulf of Mexico. But here its topic is kind of a little bit different because we are not talking about major disaster, but about kind of spills or leaks that are happening due to kind of regular operation of the industry. And we talked about that, and we did our research where this is basically the major contribution to the oil in the sea. It's a kind of, it's coming from the regular operations of the oil industry, not from the disasters. Disasters are kind of, how to say, spectacles of of that topic. I mean, of that phenomena. But this kind of situation that we have here in Rijeka, you start kind of digging, when you came here and you met lots of people, and let's start maybe from there. What did you learn in Rijeka about oil refinery? Kind of, we call it in Mlaka, you know, kind of part of the city that is basically the city center, you know, kind of you were engaged with the kind of different profiles of the people, and basically, what did you learn from them?
Yes, so one of the things which became very apparent was that one of the biggest pollutants right now of these oil seeps, which are those tiny deposits of or releases of oil, come from the post-industrial remains. So, for example, in the place where once upon the time was refinery, and now it moved to Kostrena, there is still a lot of remnants, deposits, which are kind of sipping. And the thing is, because this underwater ecosystem is so inaccessible to a regular human, we really don't know what's happening. But what I think was very important was that there were like two crucial things which I think my takeouts. One is that opacity of information and inaccessibility, which is amplified by lack of permission even to visit those places. So we had this problem or issue with port authorities where we wanted to either scuba dive and maybe if it was too dangerous, use ROV to see what is now present in terms of like animals or organisms in that area of previous petrol refinery, and we didn't get this permission, and this lack of transparency, of course, is it can be interpreted, in many ways, but one of the ways which I always fear is the kind of birth of new myth and mythologies, because if we don't know, we can come up with all sorts of stories, and some stories might be even more harmful than the truth, for example. And the other one was when we organized that open roundtable discussion in Natural History Museum, where we had actually, people from the oil industry, the INA, I think, right? And also, the ecologists from Natural History Museum and the scuba diver with whom I was diving as well around the area. And just, kind of listening to all the stories, and realizing that, the whole kind of issue of oil seeps and this, petroentanglements is very non-binary. You cannot see that something is wrong or something is bad, because, there are both sides of the story, and people who were, working for INA in 80s, they had a very happy time during this time. It was very good for community, for example, and, and the industry brought prosperity, but at the same time, there is that lack of transparency, what now is in these waters, which is bad for people who are kind of, using the coast. And at the same time, we're all complicit, because we, whether we want it or, well, I think that, we don't really want to be dependent on fossil fuel and oil, but we still are, maybe not even by choice, but we are embedded in the system, and it's very difficult to, get de-entangled. And I think, it's about coming back to what I was talking about, this kind of passion towards oceans and marine ecosystems, and kind of my attempts of conveying that passion, or making it more present in everyday life, making it more visible, because as soon as you see something, or it is in your kind of regular mode of perception, there is more chances that you will start caring for it. I think that is kind of the biggest underlying, that underpins, all my actions, trying to make sure that we can start caring for that ecosystem on which we are also very much dependent, even probably more than on oil.
Yeah, I mean, but true what you're saying. I mean, this it's kind of ambivalence is present when we're talking locally about oil refinery, for sure. And I mean, and this type of ambivalence is always present when we are talking about, industry and, yeah, we know that it's kind of, that is pollution involved always, and a kind of sometimes very serious one. And at the same time, we are all consuming and needing these products. But maybe you can tell us, since at the end, outcome of your work is artwork and exhibition. I mean, how do you see kind of this relation of the research and at the end of the exhibition? Is a kind of it has a certain communicative role in a way, for sure, but how do you see this kind of, let's call it end product in a way, from all this research and the involvement of so many people in creation of that work? And also you are using tools of artificial intelligence to help you analyze the data that you collected. So maybe we can talk about this exhibition that is happening now, but also more generally, because in your also previous works, you were working with the scientists and other type of experts, and kind of trying to communicate their findings and your findings, and also your impressions and kind of, how to say, interpretation to the wider public. So maybe you can tell us how do you see this?
It's also very, for me, it's quite. It's not an easy answer. I have these two sides in me. One is very functional, and one is very kind of poetic, if may I say so. The functional is always talking, let's gather together, let's do something, let's do something to try to find the solution. do something for, people affected. Let's make sure that this information is out there, and especially right now when there is so much the science became so mistrusted and so misinterpreted as well. And it's a very kind of daring situation. But at the same time, I always feel that, this kind of more poetic approach, which is much more kind of emotional and sublime, can help to, I don't want to say disseminate information, because I don't believe that, the art, is didactic. It shouldn't be didactic, but maybe it can help to kind of open a little window to different possibility and different world. And that way, help somebody to look at things, to look at matters from slightly different perspective. And maybe that's good enough. For me, in a way, it's a very selfish way of doing research for myself and then translating that research for myself first, and learning about the issues which I wanted to learn about through making those artworks, looking for the best form and the best kind of content and how to kind of merge it, etc., etc. And so in this kind of residencies, because, it's a very specific situation, the Stars for Water residency, and a lot of these kind of art science residencies, I think are very peculiar, because there is a lot of expectations from artists to do something as if an artist was a designer, and that is totally, that's a different topic. But suddenly there is this kind of, in a way, instrumentalization of art and artists, which is fine. And, I'm quite happy to be, in this respect, I'm quite happy to be this instrument. So here I propose a few ways of communicating my findings and my experience as a scuba diver and as an observer of those underwater environments which are affected by oil seeps. The one is very functional, where I took a lot of recordings and a lot of underwater photos, and we decided to use AI to try to see whether we can detect pollutions or oil seeps in that way, just analyzing the photographs. And the reason for that is that to detect oil seeps is a very expensive process, and it usually demands quite expensive lab equipment. And so very often, even though the water ecosystem might look all right, we actually don't know, and there's no mean of recognition for, I don't know, a person, for example, who lives on the sea and needs the clean back garden, so to speak. So we're using a model called YOLO, and we kind of started training it. There is already a model which can recognize fish, so we kind of it's open source, so we use that, and we started to kind of feed it with other things. And it's just the beginning, so there was lots of very funny situations where, for example, the scuba diver was recognized as airplane. Right now, the scuba diver is recognized as a fish, as you would be able to see it. But then, I was also playing, the lack of transparency has always been playing in my mind, and the fact that there is, when we had this open, the roundtable discussion, the host from the Natural History Museum, Marine, who is a marine scientist, said that in this region, and I think actually in many regions around the world, there was never a record of stage 0 of underwater environment, because, we didn't have equipment to take recordings of the pristine situation before. We only started to take recordings of some areas, when we started having the photography equipment which were capable of, recording stuff under the water. So even now, there's this kind of landscape amnesia happening, that we are there and we can think that maybe that's the beautiful environment, but it might be a very, very different to what it was, let's say, 70 years ago, when there was a state zero, or 120 years ago. And so with that in mind as well, I was thinking about, like we can't even, not only that we don't really see what's under the surface, but also we don't know we can't even know what it was before. And now, like for example, all these policymakers don't even allow us to go and record anymore either. So frankly, we can just come up with anything, So one of the things which I did was just made these animations based on the organism which I have observed, but they change, they transform, as they might actually, because they are kind of affected by all the chemicals. Yeah.
I mean, you used a lot of imagination, kind of in kind of imagining what is kind of underwater, since you were restricted in a way to take the pictures and data from there. But I mean, as you said, this is a situation I mean, it's not something specific. It's kind of, how to say, very present, and we can observe it kind of not only in an oil industry, but all around. Now we have a kind of huge kind of this leak from the Facebook, kind of where kind of, with NDA, these agreements doesn't allow anybody to talk about that, and that kind of, how to say, legal framework that is built about the protecting the, how to say, data or kind of processes or practices that are happening in a companies is something I would say that is becoming a standard in a way. And in that sense, kind of, it's very interesting that you said that kind of you're playing with that idea if kind of visual recognition software could help in a way to bridge in a way these restrictions, in a way, to taking samples, maybe to train, AI model to look into the patterns and recognize something that is not kind of accessible to you. And but you were using AI also in your previous kind of works, and maybe you can tell us how do you see these tools, and I mean, what is your approach in a way in a use of AI tools in kind of creative process during the development of your work, and how do you see, I mean, what is the role of AI, let's say, in your work and production of the images, or analyzing data, or kind of, so maybe you can tell us, I mean, how you use it.
Okay. It depends on the work, but let me stress that I am definitely not a technocrat, and I have a very, maybe not cynical, but careful approaches, and the way I look at those tools, and I am aware of lots of things which are bad, but also I know that there are certain things which are really good as well. For the actual act of creation, I use it as a very annoying tool. There's certain, from a very practical point of view, there are certain things which AI can do much faster than if I was to do in, let's say, 3D modeling software or, film editing software. It can make a really quick interpolations, which is really beautiful. And, if I train it on my own images, at least I know that I don't breach any, well, copyrights or of course, there is an issue of using various softwares. So, like sometimes I use Midjourney and I feel extremely guilty about it because it is this huge, it's trained on a huge data sets which lives in these huge server farms, and there is enormous ecological cost. And like I cannot help but really think about it a lot all the time. But at the same time, I was working, for example, with the small data sets. So one of the projects which I did a year ago, well, I was working on it for kind of couple of years, and a year ago, like exactly more or less a year ago, we kind of released it to the world. It was called How to Find the Soul of the Sailor, and it was a work where I used a model which was developed by University of Edinburgh, and it was based on the small data sets, which means it was much more ecological friendly, with the server farm, which was actually in the university. So it wasn't, somewhere in some horrid space which needed a lot of water to cool down. It was like a small manageable server. And I used, my dad, he wrote a lot of beautiful diaries, which I transcribed and translated. And I used this small data set to help me figure out how he would write about oceans, specifically Mediterranean Sea, in 100 years' time. So I was using a climate model, which is also from the University of Edinburgh, the climate prediction model, and I mixed it with that data based on my dad's words to see what he would be saying, and it's really hard work, AI. It's not, like it's, but I'm sure that you guys know that, it's all this kind of scaremongering that it's going to take our jobs. Probably some jobs might be taken, but the new jobs will probably emerge because of that. But in terms of creativity, like, to get actually that AI, that tool, to give me something which I felt that my father would say, took a lot of work. It wasn't a magical, like I write a prompt or a command and then suddenly I have, the whole diary entry written in my father's voice,
Because you didn't trust AI.
Oh, I didn't trust, of course I didn't. I also had, like, one of the really interesting things which happened during this time was that I realized how precious I am where this data, my father's words, are going to be based. Like, I would never let it to be used by OpenAI or ChatGPT or like, because, those words were so precious. I wanted to make sure that there is a proper resting place for them, which I can visit and I can take it away, shall I want to. So, like all those type of very interesting, emotional, digital afterlife issues have emerged as well, which I think, at some point, they will be more and more prevalent in kind of like everyday conversations, because we will be facing that, all of us.
Yeah, it's when you are kind of emotionally attached to something, whatever it is, it's difficult to share,
Yeah.
kind of. And I would say that, but this work is also very interesting from kind of, let's say, from this perspective of personal history in a way, and that you are kind of going from the kind of journals of your father and photographs, and trying to envision kind of certain future in a way. And you are using AI in that sense to bridge this time, how to say. And but I mean, and I could understand that is very emotional thing to do. And maybe could you tell us how audience perceived this work? I mean,
Ivan was in the audience. I think he can say. Well, I mean, one thing which I wanted to add about AI actually in that particular work was that I think that we in general, well, I cannot speak for everybody, but I know that I am short-sighted, and it's very difficult for me sometimes to imagine things which might be happening to the future generations, you know, to our grandchildren. Even though, like, for example, you know, we have data telling us that we will have Medicane on Mediterranean Sea, which are going to be very violent. Medicane, which is a hurricane, but it's from the Mediterranean area, you know, and the salinity is going to be way higher, you know, which is going to affect, you know, the coastlines, and it will affect all the boats or the vessels which brings goods to us, you know, as well, and that will also affect probably the work of a sailor, a job of a sailor, and so, you know, it will have all this kind of chain effect of things, and I think, you know, it's maybe in that respect, you know, that particular use of AI was very helpful, how to imagine that future also on the place which also is not very accessible to a regular human being on the open ocean. You know, only a handful of people really experience that for a long period of time. And so it's very difficult to relate. So maybe, you know, AI can be here a very good tool to help us to understand and relate that. Now, coming back to the how audience reacted, I really, you know, as an author, I really don't know how to answer this question because I am not an audience. But I hope they kind of liked
didn't
it.
receive any reaction.
I haven't seen anybody running out of the gallery being really scared. But I mean, you know, like, what I hope that they liked it. Ivan, you were there. You can say a few words. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, he's a collaborator in the sense.
Yeah, he's a collaborator.
He's not audience. Okay. Yeah. What I want to ask you, it's another thing in relation, you know, kind of when we are talking about, you just mentioned this kind of increasing of salinity of the sea. There is recently was published for preparation for the COP was a scientific report, especially concentrated on the sea, on the bleaches of the corals, and also kind of scientists from Croatia were giving the statements in the media about rising salinity of the Adriatic Sea and the rising of the temperature of the deep sea and so on. Kind of, and all this is a kind of alarming news, but in a way, I really don't see kind of, you know, kind of reactions in a way from the, neither from the citizens or kind of people, how to say, neither from the kind of governmental bodies or anybody. In a way, it seems like we just have this flow of information that kind of, you know, in a way, the context doesn't exist anymore. You know, we have kind of collapse of the context, you know, kind of that everything is just flowing, you know, kind of it's we're living in a liquid state in a way, and
No pun intended.
sorry.
No pun intended.
Yeah, kind of, and in that sense, you know, I would say that kind of art projects that are kind of dealing with these topics, in a way, are really kind of creating, how to say, deeper attachment to this the problem or phenomena or kind of, how to say, kind of that very important topics. And I would say that it's really kind of quite present now in the art world to deal with these topics, and I see really kind of reason why is that. How do you see kind of having kind of all this taking in account kind of the future of because we kind of observing kind of this political situation, cutting of the funds for the very important kind of scientific research, also satellites that are covering measuring the carbon emissions from the space and so on. So we are kind of living in the world where it seems kind of in the same time we having bigger and bigger problems related to climate and environment, and at the same time we are kind of how to say, kind of not reacting, even kind of decreasing the reaction or kind of knowledge about that. How you see how art can react in this context?
I mean, I can only talk about myself. I cannot say in the name of whole of the art in the world.
No, of course. It is.
But let me just say a couple of things before that, actually, because what you said was super interesting. So last year as well, I was funnily enough artist in residence in DEFRA, and DEFRA is the Ministry of Environment in England. And I was placed in the DEFRA Futures, which is department which was dealing with the climate tipping point and possible environmental disasters which might come because of that. And I was trying to, and frankly, I have no idea what they expected from me. I still don't know. But I was trying to see what is their take on the seas, on the coastal kind of national waters and international waters. And I was talking to scientists because also, there's the science department. So DEFRA is the science department. They do lots of research, and then they feed this research to policymakers, to the ministers. And then the ministers, they decide whether they want to implement policy or not. But the scientists, they do work very hard, and they have, the information which they get is really, really alarming, to be perfectly honest. But they said to me that in terms of oceans, for example, they really don't like to touch it because unlike land, which is regulated, it's a kind of dry ontology, which can be really easily mapped on 2D, map and divided, in squares. The wet ontology, which is, water, is unregulated, and they are just scared of it because they don't know how to deal with it. So the oceans always is the sea is always left as something which they need to do something about, but maybe later, or they kind of, do the most kind of visible issues like overfishing, for example. But coming back to what you said about this information and, and the fact that there is so much out there right now, I think it's alarming, and I think we are very much overwhelmed in general, and I think, I don't know, I feel, I don't know if I'm right, but I feel there is a certain apathy as well, in a way, there is a group of people who are very active and, and try to do some change and raise awareness and, and be hopeful. And I really hope that I am in this category, but sometimes I'm very apathetic as well. But I think what me as an artist can do is to make those huge problems scaled maybe to a bit more human level, to something which you can relate, on which something which can be in front of you, and something which is small. Well, it's not smaller. It's not a smaller problem, but it's kind of packaged in such a way so that you can relate to it on a very personal level. And I think that's very important.
Definitely. I mean, do we have some maybe questions from or comment from audience? Yeah.
Thanks. You hear me? Hello. Well, I just have a question. Who is, you were talking about this transparency, problematic transparency of the information. So who is basically the gatekeeper of the information? So you said you didn't get the permission. So it was like port authority, and then are any like ministries involved in this, or like city municipality? Where it was stuck?
I think Barbara was sending emails and letters to everybody. There was lots of no's.
No, I mean, it's you need the permission from the port authority to dive in a port and to collect data, and that's it. Basically, they are the authority that gives you or not that permission. I mean, here in this concrete example. Mike.
Municipality elections in the council. All right. No, I'm just saying, like a conspiracy theory. There was at the same time there was a mayor election in Rijeka, if I'm correct, and it could be like some kind of dark forces are plotting against the whatever incoming mayor or something like that. But
Yeah, but the situation is, it's not unusual, because for the Stars for Water, there was like 40 residencies and
20.
Or 20, okay. But at a lot of them, they were based in various harbors across Europe, and most people, they have the same situation. They have the same problem.
I mean, yeah, true. I mean, Port of Amsterdam, Antwerp, I mean, kind of...
in Ireland as well, I know.
In Ireland, yeah. I mean, this is the kind of regular business, I would say. I mean, it's not something exceptional in that sense, yeah.
Yeah, but I think what we were discussing when it was happening here, we were trying to get this permission. Correct me if I am wrong, but in Croatia, there is a law that the coast belongs to everybody, right? That there is like 3 meters of the coast which can be accessible to everybody.
I mean, kind of, yeah, in principle, it's exactly like that, but
it is, well, yes, so it is.
No, but there are exceptions.
Right, okay. Well, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, what?
Well, the time.
Yeah, time out.
Time out.
Okay, anyway, I mean, thank you, Kasia, for this talk and for the work. And now we can move to the gallery and see the show. Yeah?
Yes, and also what I wanted to say is that hopefully it's not the end, because we have some other plans, and hopefully we will bring the citizen science project here, and we'll continue.
Yeah.
So be warned and be ready.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.